Before we bring you episode 1 of A Christmas Serial, we hope you'll permit us this short introduction. Merry Christmas from No Extra Words, the Flash Fiction podcast. My name is Chris Baker-Dersch. I'm your producer and editor. Welcome to the first of our 4-part Christmas serial special. This is episode 1 of 4, presenting this form of storytelling to you. Before Serial was a famous podcast from the producers of This American Life, it was the word for a story told in sections, usually published in the newspaper. The 19th century was full of this. A lot of writers that you have heard of, Charles Dickens, L.M. Montgomery, Louisa May Alcott, published their books this way. Dickens was famous for this. He was, of course, an English writer in the 19th century, and he published the Pickwick Papers and many of his other books this way in newspaper format. And there are actually stories of his American fans standing in New York Harbor waiting for those British papers to come off the boat so they could get the next installment of the story. And serialized literature had this cool feature that the story could actually be adapted based on the feedback from the readers, because, of course, it's being written in real time as it's being read. It's slid out of fashion in the years since then, but in some ways the internet has brought it back in a way, and this is our experiment here at No Extra Words with this form of storytelling. This is the way this is going to work. The Christmas serial story is going to come at you in 4 chunks, 1 chunk in each of the next 4 episodes starting today. The story will be complete when you get to the end of the series, and it is best listened to in order, although we are going to do a previously on and next on at the beginning and end of each segment, so you'll have some idea where in the story you are. Because this is No Extra Words, we're also going to pair each one of these installments with another short story by one of our contributors. So these episodes are going to be considerably longer than you're used to. If you're a first-time listener, know that our usual episodes are less than 15 minutes long. So I'm not talking about a huge commitment of time. We're going to release one of these a week on the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning of each week leading up to December 23rd when the last one will come out. So if you're hearing this weeks in the future, just know this is the way the release schedule has worked. This has been a long time coming, bringing this to you. Very much looking forward to sharing with you this kind of storytelling, and would love to hear what you think about it. We are at noextrawords.wordpress.com. You can get a hold of us there and let us know. And who knows, maybe this serial, like the ones Dickens wrote, will be adapted based on the feedback we are hearing from our listeners. So without further ado, we will get you to installment 1, Making the List, and we will see you soon. Happy Christmas season from all of us at No Extra Words. A Christmas Serial Part 1, Making the List. Tweedledum and Tweedledee are in a snit about something, insisting to see you as soon as possible, the boss's secretary announced, barging into his office without knocking and dropping a stack of papers onto his desk. The boss looked up. Can't it wait until... But she had already gone, ushering in the 2 main causes of his heartburn as she left. Sir, barked the shorter one, we need to change protocol immediately. If I had been informed what was going... Some people, he paused only half a breath to glare at his counterpart, do not understand the necessity of following the rules that govern security in this facility. We may be in imminent danger as we stand. What? The taller of the 2 had poked him in the side, indicating the boss's hand held out like a stop sign. Gerald, said the boss. Alexander, I just got to this meeting, remember? Catch me up, please. He, Gerald pointed a bony finger at Alexander's nose, needs to tell you something. Well... Alexander stared at his toes. I was at work in the center early this morning, and I noticed 2 boys headed our way. They were in trouble. They had stolen their mother's car and were coming to see us. It was snowing, the roads were treacherous, they were lost, and I was afraid they were going to drive off the road. I helped them. I'm sure I don't know what you were thinking. Gerald sniffed. Were you thinking? I'm going to have quite a morning cleaning this up. I suppose, he looked pointedly at his boss, that this is the sort of factory you want to run? Alexander, said the boss. I'm sorry, sir. You don't have to call me sir. You know interfering isn't safe. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Alexander bit his lip. Sorry! Easy to say that now you're sorry. We have protocol. We have plans. Gerald, the boss interrupted. What is your job title? Gerald drew himself up to his full height of 4'10". Director of Security and Communications? You might consider calling me sir. Gerald gaped. I run a staff of... Wonderful. Am I on it? Long pause. Of course not, sir. Is Alexander? He is a peer, certainly, but not directly. That's settled. Alexander has admitted his error, and thus far there has been no damage. We can sort out the rest of the details at the 10 o'clock staff meeting. The rest should be between him and... But, sir, Alexander's voice was panicky. I don't think you understand what... we have to prepare for. I didn't know quite how to... Gerald turned to him slowly. What did you do? Alexander looked back at the floor. I cleared a road for them. The office was silent for about 17 seconds before Gerald exploded. You did what? The boss pressed a button on his desk. His secretary bustled back in with her notepad. Ready for dictation, sir? She glared at Alexander and Gerald. We're going to have to skip dictation just now, Gwen. In a few moments, a car is going to come into town from the south. I need to make sure it stops at the barn and parks. Call Maury down in animal care. He can help you. There should be 2 boys in the car. Have them brought around to my private entrance as soon as possible. I also need a plate of cookies, 4 cocos, and see if you can find me a cup of coffee. A car, sir? Gwen remained expressionless, but her voice quavered slightly. Yes, but let's please not alert the whole town. Hurry, or they will end up at the high school. She fled. For the next several minutes, no one said a word. After what felt like hours, there was a knock at the back door. The boss opened it. Morning, Maury. How's my team today? They'll be ready, sir. Good. Come on in, you 2. The boss ushered in 2 boys, one about 8 years old and the other several years older. He glanced at Alexander. Adam and Kevin, Alexander squeaked. Kevin is the big one. The boys sat down, looking suspicious, but when they saw the cookies Gwen had brought, they dove right in. Now, said the boss, looking grave but with a twinkle in his eye, you know where you are, don't you? Adam looked up at him and grinned. You're Santa Claus, aren't you? He stuck his tongue out at his brother. See? I told ya. Santa laughed. I'm him. And this is Gerald. Gerald avoided eye contact with the invaders. And that over there is Alexander. Alexander waved half-heartedly. The 2 of them are the heads of the main factory departments. Adam's eyes widened. Elves? Santa nodded. Cool, breathed Adam. Kevin did not look impressed. Adam, said Santa, you shouldn't have come here. It wasn't safe. You know that, don't you? Adam chewed his lower lip. Are you mad? He whispered. I'm disappointed. I wanted him, Adam jerked a thumb at his older brother, to believe. Ever since we moved to Centerville, everybody's been so serious all the time. I wanted to do something fun. Did you want your parents to worry about you? Santa asked. Do you think they're going to be happy when they find out that you've run away? That's not a very nice Christmas present. Adam hung his head. I guess not. He hesitated. Am I going to be on the list? Santa's brow furrowed. The list? You know. Adam leaned in closer. The naughty list. Dude. Kevin rolled his eyes at his brother. You are so gullible, you know that? Do you boys like raspberry pancakes? Asked Santa, changing the subject. Huh? Asked Kevin. My wife makes the best raspberry pancakes I've ever tasted. Don't know how she does it with frozen fruit. Of course, frozen fruit is all we get around here. It isn't really a good idea for you boys to be wandering around by yourselves up here. He looked directly at Kevin. After all, I think Kevin knows there have already been enough bad decisions for one day. Don't you, Kevin? He emphasized each word. Kevin nodded glumly. And no matter what craziness is happening here, you don't want me to call your mother, do you? Kevin shook his head. So if you 2 have breakfast at my house, behave yourselves and stay there until I come get you, I will see what I can do about getting you home and keeping you off the list. You'll play along, won't you? Kevin would be unlikely to believe any story involving Santa, but Santa needed him to cooperate. Kevin nodded. He needed Santa, too. Excellent. Santa turned to Alexander. Knock on the side door. Karen should be home. Just tell her I'll be over when I can. Be back over for the 10 o'clock briefing, and in the meantime, not one toe in the Naughty and Nice Center. Are we clear? Yes, sir. As Alexander ran from the room with the boys, Gwen came in with more coffee and more paperwork. Gerald, you know I'm trusting you, said Santa. You too, Gwen. She turned to him, folder in hand, fingers drumming impatiently. I trust that no one in town knows these boys are here, and furthermore that no one will know. Gerald, slumped into a chair, arms across his chest, harumphed. Gwen glanced at the door nervously, then nodded. Santa was satisfied. Briefing at 10, he said, and with that they cleared out of his office. Mrs. Claus, who asked Adam and Kevin to call her Karen, was indeed a good cook, and her raspberry pancakes were better than advertised. She wasn't a little old lady with white hair and glasses like Adam had pictured. She was actually a little bit like Grandma Erin, complete with short hair and trendy snow boots. She suggested a nap after breakfast, and Kevin agreed immediately. Maybe it was the North Pole, and maybe it was a dream or a hoax, but the food was good, and Kevin always liked a nap. Adam wasn't tired. He begged to be allowed to go outside and explore. Karen was reluctant. Santa has meetings most of the morning, and I know he'll want to talk to you before you go anywhere, she said. If you really can't stay indoors, you can go out to the barn. Maury already knows you're here, so there's no harm in going down there and meeting the reindeer. Mind you stay out of the way and don't leave the barn, she called to his disappearing back, but all Adam really heard was meet the reindeer. The barn was spotless. Reindeer were in short-walled pens with clean dirt floors. Each had a bright green bucket of water and a bright red one filled with food. Reindeer pens lined the walls of the large room, and parked in the open spot in the center was Adam's mother's Volkswagen. An elf was struggling with a hay cart on one side of the barn. He muttered something in a language Adam didn't understand as it tipped precariously towards the hindquarters of a nearby reindeer. Adam ran to help. Together, he and the elf righted the hay cart, its front wheel narrowly missing Adam's right foot. "Thanks," said the elf. "I didn't want to hurt him. Sometimes I talk to them in French. It's soothing, you know. You work here?" Adam stared at him wide-eyed and shook his head. "Do you?" he asked. "Not full time, but this time of year they hire some of us college kids to work as interns. My artistic crafts professor says I have no special gift for the arts, and my people and perceptions professor says I have no special gift with people. So they were kind of hoping, that I have a special gift with animals. I think I do," he went on eagerly, "'cause when I speak French to 'em, it's like they understand me, and no one ever spoke French to 'em before." "Do they talk back?" The elf hooted with laughter, startling the reindeer next to him into knocking over its water bucket. This spilled onto the reindeer next to it, which let out a large snort and kicked the wall of its pen, sliding it out of place and knocking an unfortunate elf who was tending the hoof of another reindeer into the hindquarters of his patient. The elf glared at Adam and his companion, who did not notice. "Ach, that was funny," he said, wiping his eyes. "Imagine a reindeer talking. Only thing reindeer do is fly. Now an elf can shine the stars, or inspire a symphony, can move 10 times as fast as any animal on earth and make beautiful creations or inspire great discoveries. I once saw an elf hold an entire apartment building on one shoulder. He was that strong. But you've never seen an elf that can fly, and that's what reindeer do." Adam nodded as though he understood. The elf, meanwhile, was staring at him as if he'd just figured something out. "You're not... you are what they say, aren't you? It's true, isn't it? "I'm Adam," offered Adam, "from Centerville." The elf rushed forward to shake Adam's hand and pushed him into a reindeer who turned and glared at him. "I'm Marvin. It's nice to meet you. Don't mind Mo. She doesn't have the energy to hurt you. Why, I never would have believed it to be true, but here you are, and in my department." Adam wished Marvin would speak just a little quieter. Karen hadn't been too sure about letting him leave the house, and he was pretty sure no one was supposed to know he was here, although he didn't know why. "Maybe you shouldn't tell anyone," he said, looking around for more elves. "Of course not," Marvin babbled a little in French. "We'll just walk around like normal, I can introduce you to the reindeer." He turned hurriedly and bumped into a pen wall which burst open. "Can you?" asked Adam. "Ah, sure. That there is Zeus." He indicated the large and rather grumpy-looking reindeer whose meal he had just interrupted. "He led last year's Christmas Eve team, a huge honor. Next to him is Hercules, his biggest competition this year. Maury hasn't made the final call yet, The 2 little ones over there are Crash and Burn, brothers who fight like you wouldn't believe. We used to keep Raspberry between them. She's the pretty reddish one over there, but they fought something terrible over her. The one on the far side is Go, fastest reindeer Maury's ever seen. We call the scrawny one Mystery, and next to her is Indecisive, short for indecisive, 'cause she's never sure which direction she's headed, Paquito is the big one. That's Miguel's idea of a joke. Tank is bigger than Paquito, but Paquito is still growing. Joey's the youngest, but Half Pint over there is the smallest. Teeter is the oldest, teetering on the edge of retirement, Maury would say. Ali is the gentlest, and Guess is the nicest. I got to name this one. Call her Play." "Play?" "Short for s'il vous plaît. That's please in French, 'cause I'm always begging her to please cooperate, And this guy," he stood proudly by a pen in the corner, "is the real leader. Led the Christmas Eve team 4 years in a row until last year, a record. We just call him Mister." "Wow." Adam looked up at the reindeer. But where's Rudolph? Who? Marvin looked confused. You know, like the song. You know, Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen, but do you recall the most famous reindeer of all? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Marvin shrugged. Must be an old team. Like I say, I'm just in training, you know? So you use, like, different reindeer every year? Ah, sure. It's rare for a reindeer to do more than one Christmas Eve run in their life. We ship a lot of stuff with reindeer, though. Nothing leaves Christmastown unless it's carried by reindeer. Whoa. Adam wondered if he would get to ride a reindeer home. Marvin winked at him. Want to try? Really? Ah, why not? The sleigh's being repaired right now, and a few of these guys could use a workout. I'm treating Gordy's leg, so I'll ride him. You take Mariner. He's good with beginners. He led Adam to a pen in the back. Adam looked uncertainly at the reindeer. It's okay, Marvin said. Just climb on his back and hold on to his antlers. Attaway. Now lean forward. He'll walk when he feels it. Sure enough, the reindeer's bulky shoulders shifted under Adam's legs. Marvin jumped onto a nearby reindeer, nearly catapulting over its back and back onto the floor on the other side, but somehow he managed to hold on and follow Adam out the door. Mariner's hooves began to float off the ground, just a few inches at first, then higher and higher until the ground dropped away and Adam could feel nothing but the wind on his face and hear nothing but Marvin's whoops as he and Gordy flew circles around them. Just flying in a straight line was enough for Adam. Holding on tight, he tried to open his eyes, blasted shut by the wind, and really see that he was flying over the North Pole on one of Santa's reindeer. He peeked down at the town below. Mariner's pace began to slow, and Adam could no longer hear Marvin yelling. As the reindeer's hooves touched the ground, he could see Karen Claus, hands on her hips, watching his every move. Adam gulped. Oops. Santa? At the sound of Gwen's voice, Santa ducked his head behind the papers piled on his desk. He'd been meaning to wander over to the Naughty and Nice Center. Perhaps she'd think he was already gone. Patty is here to see you, she said, sweeping the papers he'd spent the morning organizing into one stack and placing them on top of his inbox. Patty? He asked, still looking at the papers. Gwen smiled. Allowances must be made for Santa, as he was, of course, only human. If he were an elf, he'd remember the name of everyone in Christmastown, whether they worked for him or not. Patty teaches at Little Stockings Primary School. Her father used to work on the 4th floor, although that may have been before your time. She's here with some drama about the whole youth population of Christmastown going down the tubes. I'll get rid of her if you like. No, Santa had been expecting this. Every elf who knew about the morning security breach had strict instructions to tell no one, so there was no doubt that all of Christmastown knew. The more conservative elements of the community had to be up in arms. Show her in. Gwen raised one eyebrow but did not protest. She opened the door for the visitor as she exited. Sir, said the elf without waiting to be acknowledged, I am a teacher here in Christmastown. I know my position hardly qualifies me to approach you directly, but I felt I must. I care very much about outside influences on our children. I have come to implore you, she took a deep breath, to tell me these rumors I have been hearing are untrue. Certainly you cannot be harboring, she lowered her voice, human children. Patty, said Santa gently, I am sure you understand that I am not in a position to confirm or deny rumors related to security. Gerald is our Director of Security and Communications, and his office is just around the corner. I'm certain he can answer any questions. You mean it's true? Patty was distraught. Dear heavens, I did not actually believe it. Sir, with all due respect, do you have any idea what you are doing? Santa raised his hand in what had become a familiar gesture that morning, but there was no stopping Patty. Sir, since the beginning of time, the safety and security of the elfin community and the work that we do has required an absolute and essential separation between our world and theirs. This is the very first lesson young elves learn. When we began interfering with their Christmas holiday, there were many right-thinking elves who believed that there would be chaos, and that breaking the magical wall that separates us from them would lead to our demise. They were not listened to, of course, and now we see what happens. She trailed off, unwilling or unable to speculate about what happens. Patty, I appreciate you coming by today, said Santa. As I've said, I'm not in a position to talk about anything that may or may not be happening with regard to our security. Gerald manages that department, and his office also monitors how Christmastown elves are portrayed in human media. If you have further questions, you should talk to— No, sir, Patty shook her head. With all due respect, we are not finished. I have not yet told you what I came here to say. I need you to listen, sir, and I beg of you to understand me. I do not know what is happening, but if what I am hearing is true, we are in grave danger. I and the other citizens of Christmastown will not allow this situation to endanger our children and our community. If all ties must be severed between the elfin and human worlds, then severed they will be. If the traditions of Santa Claus and Christmas are creating problems with our security, then those traditions may be considered as of this moment ended. I came here today to warn you that if it is a question of our security versus your role as Santa, we will stand against you. I beg of you to consider, sir, what happens to all of us if this becomes a standoff. It is not something I wish to see." She was gone before Santa could think of a response. Outside his office door, he could hear her asking for the Director of Security and Communications. He let out a low whistle. Suspicion and fear he had expected, but this was a whole different thing. If Patty was correct about the feelings of a certain group of Christmastown elves, it seemed the whole future of Christmas could rest squarely on Gerald's shoulders. This was not a confidence-inspiring thought. Coming up next week on A Christmas Serial. After his high-flying reindeer adventure, Adam should know better than to wander around Christmastown. But he ends up center stage again, and he and Kevin are about to get a babysitter, someone who is none too happy about it. Will the elves ever recover from being invaded by human children? Tune in next week for the second installment of A Christmas Serial here on the No Extra Word podcast. Hello, Chris Baker Dersch here again, checking in with your short story for this episode. It was a fun challenge to choose stories to go alongside the Christmas Serial installments. And I was looking for stories that were short, because these episodes are already pretty long, and would pair with the lightness and the whimsy of the Christmas Serial. They're not necessarily holiday themed, but I hope they will go nicely with the overall story that you're being told. The one for today is Garrick and the Dare by Sean Cowling, and it is about a man who, somewhat like Adam and Kevin, had a brilliant idea that landed him in maybe not exactly the place he wanted to be. Musical credits today. The Christmas music that you are hearing is played by the U.S. Marine Corps Band, and as such is in the public domain. And our theme music, as always, is Reverie Small Theme by Ghost, used under a Creative Commons license. See you next time. Garrick and the Dare by Sean Cowling. Garrick once ate a live frog. It was a dare following a day of learning about Mark Twain. He missed the metaphor of the story. His friends were rather impressed and terribly disgusted at once. As he ate the slippery beast, he thought not of how truly mortifying the event was, but on the laughs and guffaws of his preteen followers. He was hooked. Through the rest of his life, Garrick sought after trouble and danger. Anything that made people cringe or cackle, he wanted to do it. It was this that brought him to the top of Mount Prosperity. The locals called it Mount Don't Look Down for fun and warning. The mountain went up fast. Garrick's purpose for the visit was to climb to the top, place himself inside a barrel, and roll down the hill before hitting a ramp and with luck launch himself over 3 trucks. His wife nixed the idea to fill the truck beds with cobras and medical waste. She had to help the crew clean up afterward and wanted nothing to do with cobras. She also had no idea where to rent a truck's bed worth of cobras in southern Wyoming. She especially did not want to learn how to find a truck's bed worth of cobras in southern Wyoming. She loved her stupid husband, but not to shop the black market levels. Garrick climbed the mountain with a barrel strapped to his back. The entire climb up he resisted the urge to throw the barrel down, shouting, "Eat this, Mario!" It was more restraint than he was known for. He reached the top, kicked the orange dirt, and looked at the grassland surrounding him. It was gorgeous. The entire scene made him feel like a better human, tuned to nature and experiencing nothing more than existential glee. He grinned and nodded. Yes, he told himself, life is good. Then he stuffed himself inside an unused oil drum and ate his elbows. He rocked the barrel back and forth until it toppled over. He was in place and ready for the fall. With one mighty push he began his downward roll. The world whirred by. His head spun, and lunch eaten hours earlier found its way back on his face. He fell and screamed. He had done many dumb things in his life, but every currently happening dumb thing felt like the dumbest of them all. His barrel roll was no exception. He felt the barrel hit the ramp, and for a brief, glorious moment he felt weightless. He landed on the opposite ramp, the barrel shattered on impact, and he was sent flying. Limbs flailed wildly as he continued to spin. He skipped over the asphalt of the small town road he was not supposed to land on, but flew onto anyway. He slowed to a stop and could do nothing but moan. When his wife's face appeared against the blue sky above him, he smiled. "You were right about the cobras," he said. "Of course I was," she replied. "Let's get you to the ER."